Thank you for that, though. As was mentioned, I'm Lance Peterman, and need slides. There we go. So brief introduction. I am the IAM strategy and platform lead at Merck. Because apparently I have lots of extra spare time, I'm also an adjunct professor at UNC Charlotte teaching software architecture and design. And I have even more time, so I'm also a board member of ID Pro. Quick disclaimer, all the opinions are my own. Obviously, I am going to be presenting a perspective on Merck's digital journey, so there will be some factual information presented, but similar to Hamilton, the historical accuracy may not quite be 100%. And if you are interested in any of these slides, I will be publishing them, and I will publish the URL on Twitter using that handle. So I decided to rename this talk Through the Horse's Ears, and it was based on a Facebook group that my wife had joined many years ago, and the focus of this group, and they are actually pretty heavy from an editorial perspective on the photos that you took had to be literally through the horse's ears, so you can see here. This actually would not be canonical for them, but it happens to be me, so I added it. But the emphasis of the group was this perspective that by seeing the world through the horse's ears, you could understand, in some respects, what the horse was seeing through their eyes as you would have it. And so, as you can see in this photo, what's taking place here is I'm doing a cattle clinic with my horse Freckles. And as you can probably tell from her ears being very forward, she is very tuned into what's going on. It was a terrific experience, and we learned a lot. We even learned about where her bubbles are with respect to cows. She's absolutely fascinated with them until you get to about a 3-foot radius. And then she's like, you know what, that's close enough. And given that one of these was a bull, can't say that I blame her. So part of the reason behind this, that I wanted to rename this talk, was I've learned a lot in this journey as a horseman. And what I have discovered over time in my identity career, and frankly in my IT career as well, but obviously we're going to be focusing on identity, is as I have learned with her, a lot of lessons have come forward, and I'm going to share those with you. Hopefully you'll enjoy and appreciate them besides just the horse photos. But some of the lessons that we can take in terms of how we engage with our business and our other partners as we go through our own identity journeys at your respective companies. And we're going to do this in the language of natural horsemanship. So natural horsemanship, this is going to correlate with the timeline. We have 4 phases: online, freestyle, liberty, and finesse, and I'll explain what those are as we get to them. And then I will also tie them into the relative dates as to when we did some of these activities. So at level 1, we start online. Why do we do that? Well, horses are 1,000-pound plus animals. Some people have a somewhat unnatural fear of them. But they're large animals, and so accidents can happen. So the best thing you can do from a safety perspective is, as you can see here, you have a line attached, and you can create distance where you need to. Or, if they get crazy, you can just let go of the rope and say, you do whatever you want to do. What we're doing here with Freckles is I'm working her, just trying to get some exercise going over barrels. But because we hadn't quite gotten to that point where I could just say, hey, Freckles, go over that barrel, we're online. Similarly with the business, part of the foundation when you get online with your horses, the first thing you're doing is learning how to communicate with them. And as you can probably guess, horses don't speak human. So you have to learn how to communicate with horses using their language. Similarly, in identity, you have to use the language of the business in order to be successful with them. And maybe along the way, you teach them some of your terms too. Similarly with the horse, I can ask Freckles to trot, and she will trot. I can ask her to canter, she will canter. She's learned those cues because even though she doesn't understand English, she understands sounds, and she can mirror those. So within the business perspective, this is where we begin that journey, and we're just starting to align with Merck's business strategy. So early in our identity journey, where most enterprises go through it as well, is you're just looking to obtain efficiencies. You're trying to learn how to create identities in a streamlined fashion. You're trying to get users access to some applications at a basic level, but that's kind of as far as you're going to take it. And so now I'll talk you through some of Merck's direct business drivers. When I joined Merck, they were in the process of converting a massive conversion of all of their systems. And when I say all of their systems, like even their manufacturing systems to SAP. This was roughly 2007 to 2009. Key capabilities that we had deployed at that point: directory sync, basic provisioning, getting that life cycle, removing that access in a timely fashion so you can protect your assets, password management. You guys know how well that goes. Early federation adoption. So we're trying to adopt some of those early standards. Early WAM adoption, mainly to enable single sign-on access even internally. And then we're also deploying two-factor, especially for external use. However, just as we thought we had our eyes on the prize, our business throws us a curve. They said, hey, let's pick up a really big company about our size and let's become one. So we literally doubled our size by merging with Sharing Plow. And so anybody who's been through an integration story, you know what a pain that can be. When you're dealing with integrating an equal, those levels of complexity go up by several factors of magnitude. But ultimately, these are kind of the shared business goals. So in addition to trying to convert to SAP, we're now trying to integrate an entire enterprise. So ultimately, what you're looking for there is some harmonization. So obviously, we're looking to consolidate identity platforms. We have to figure out what directories we're going to standardize on. Luckily, we were both on AD. Their structure was a little different than ours. And then we have to figure out what our target IAM systems are going to be. They have some, we have some. Which ones win? One of the things that we tried to do early on, they had adopted some password synchronization patterns that, for anybody who's been in identity, probably isn't a fan of for good reasons. We also added PKI so that we could create this managed device environment as another way of authenticating our users and our devices. We added some self-service capabilities, giving users the ability to manage their non-person accounts. The other advantage that we got with that was we were able to establish the owners of those non-person accounts, which hopefully some of you can share some of that pain, that sometimes that's hard to figure out. And they can also manage their distribution lists. We also created a brand new partner identity management system that was previously in HR. That was a huge shift from our legacy system, but became a huge value to our customers. Our federation practice was growing, and the other big change as we merged two identity organizations was we created an identity and access management center of excellence. And this really became a huge value for us. So we're getting pretty mature here. Let's get in the saddle. And so now we move into the next level, which is freestyle. Freestyle just simply means you're in the saddle. You're using the style of the horse to move. But a famous horseman named Pat Pirelli once said, riding a horse is nothing more than the act of not falling off. It sounds easy. I would love to say I've never done it, but I have many times. But what you're trying to do in this scenario is apply those concepts that you learned online in the saddle. So can you still have that same level of communication, similar to within your business? As you continue to mature, can you keep those communication channels open? You're still applying the same principles that you did when you were doing things online, but you're also adding to that and trying to mature your capabilities to keep alignment with the business. We had another curveball thrown at us shortly after the sharing merger began. Oracle decided to buy Sun, one of their last major acquisitions in their pattern for that. And that was hugely disruptive for us because we were a large Sun shop at the time. So this affected our identity management, our access management, particularly our single sign-on from a federation standpoint, our access certification because we own Sun Role Manager, and our directory management. But it was a little bit of a convenient timing in the sense that we were still choosing what our end state would look like. So this gave us an opportunity to add new information to the mix and not have to make a second change midstream, which was nice. From the business side, again, trying to integrate those concepts, we're now looking at compliance and governance a lot more closely. Not that we weren't doing it before, but now we're trying to put in systems kind of keeping in alignment with that identity access and governance, or identity governance and administration, depending upon which analyst you were talking to at the time. I think we've settled on IGA. I think that's become the common term. But this is ultimately what we're looking at from a business driver perspective. Merck obviously is a large, publicly traded, largely regulated company, so compliance is a huge driving factor. And from an identity perspective, we still tag this as a business driver. We had obtained some maturity in provisioning identities and getting users that initial access to email and basic systems like our online training system. But we really hadn't done anything with respect to delivering access to target applications in a timely fashion for those users. A lot of these processes were manual. So part of our effort here, as we begin to mature more, is can we get into a cadence with the business where when users need access, we can deliver that in a timely fashion. And that was the genesis of our IAG movement. That's what I titled it at the time. And it focused on 3 programs. Access Center, which was delivering timely access to applications. Privileged Access Management, which if you joined me yesterday, you know a little bit about what we were doing there. And then finally, our Access Entitlement and Review Service. We've delivered you access. Now let's make sure that we can review that access in a timely fashion and ensure that you still need it. From 2012 to 2015, as we deployed this service, we're formalizing those 3 areas. We've also created a critical systems list because one of the things we wanted to do was make sure we got to the important ones first. And I think that's a good practice to have. We did have a lot of growing pains with Access Center. It was an Oracle product. It was a brand new Oracle product. It was 11GR2. And they made some seismic changes in the product that, frankly, just caused us a lot of growing pains, particularly in configuration management. Adoption of PAM overall kind of grew at a steady pace. We had growing pains there, keeping your developers happy, particularly your SQL DBAs. They seem to be, relatively high maintenance at times. But we navigated through it. The other key thing that we did was we began to transition some of our turnkey or steady state services to our IT operations area. So previously we were just a big IAM organization. Now we kind of broke off the operational side where we could realize some of those IT service management efficiencies that was taking place in other areas of the business and make what we're doing even better. And finally, as you're rolling out those IGA services, make sure your business understands that simply enrolling in those services does not mean you are compliant. More importantly, it doesn't mean you're secure. I have my accounts in PAM, I'm done, right? No, it's not how it works. So now we move into the next phase, which is liberty. And what liberty simply means is you're taking off the lines. You're not in the saddle, because you want to be safe, but you're taking off all the lines. You're operating without a net. And what we say in horsemanship is that's where the truth is. Because you find out what your horse thinks of you then. If they like you and they want to listen and are interested in what you have to say, then you can have a conversation. What you see in this picture, my horse Freckles, we're actually doing a Liberty Challenge, and I'm asking her to land on that tarp. And as you can probably tell from her trajectory, she's probably not going to make it. The good news was, and I was going to add the other picture, she did wind up getting there only after going back to the audience, asking them kind of what they thought, and soliciting their opinion, and then we kind of reconnected and we got there. But doing this asks several questions. Does your partner trust you? Does your business trust you that you're working in their favor? Are they focused on you? Are you focused on them? Are you communicating clearly, or is there noise in those channels? That's one of the challenges when you're in a natural environment with a horse. There's a lot going on, especially when you're trail riding. You never know when that deer is going to flash out in front of you, and making sure that you still have those channels of communication. And probably more importantly, are you listening to what's going on? So often we do in identity, we've got these tools and we need to roll these tools out. I want to bring you into this room to tell you why we're going to roll these tools out for you. As opposed to starting with the conversation with, how are you doing today? Where's your focus? What are your business drivers? And then maybe trying to align those. And obviously, meanwhile, the business never stops. It's been busy as well. They're really moving into the collaboration phase of research, and this is true for most pharma companies. I know we've got several partners in the room, including the track lead, where previously Merck had what I would just call this ivory tower mentality of research and development of therapies. And that age has long passed. Basically, what we discovered was in order for us to continue to create these novel therapies, we had to, kind of similar to what Andrew McAfee talked about, although not quite to the crowd level, we had to collaborate because there were wisdom in other areas that we just simply weren't taking advantage of. A good example of that is a recent product announcement that we have in the immuno-oncology space, that once we realized that we had some success in treating malignant melanoma, which had a very high death rate to it, we said, let's take this compound and collaborate with other partners and figure out what other forms of cancer might be effective with this, so we can save even more lives. And that's where the value of this collaboration comes in. But obviously, as you attempt that collaboration, that comes with its own challenges, particularly in the identity space. Part of that was ending the Merck-centered universe of identity. Every time we had a partner that was going to collaborate with us, you get an identity, and you get an identity, and you get an identity. I'm Oprah now. And that doesn't work. When you have a lot of collaborative partners, and they have a lot of collaborative partners, the last thing they want to deal with is what I call YAC. It's a term I've created, and I don't think anybody has trademarked it yet. It's called yet another credential. And so when we're dealing with, for example, our clinical trial researchers, what they don't want to do is go into a hospital setting and figure out which fob they're going to fish for so that they can do two-factor authentication into this site for Merck, and then turn around and do something else for Pfizer or for J&J. GSK, you get the idea. So instead, and this just gives you kind of a historical perspective of how we've begun to mature that. We started out with Federation. We moved into our PartnerNet service, which kind of gave secure file transfer, site-to-site VPN, and then we created EngageZone, and we did so in a partner with a company called ExoStar. And those activities were Safe Biopharma certified. We created a large collaboration platform that would enable large file transfers, because as we do these clinical trials, we have massive amounts of data that come out of that, and we need to be able to transport that in an easy fashion. And we were able to introduce digital rights management, because now that we're working in the cloud, we want to make sure that we can control that data. Kind of a reedy slide. What is EngageZone? Really, it's a collaboration portal. So it allows our external partners and Merck to work together on this research, share the data, discover what the wisdom and knowledge that comes out of it, and add other applications to it. So you look here, this was the concept behind ExoStar, or the life sciences ecosystem, was you would start with an identity hub. So instead of Merck being the IDP, ExoStar became the IDP for us. We wanted to get out of the identity management business. So you would start with, okay, I need to get access to EngageZone. I'm Merck, I want to get access to EngageZone. Obviously, we own it. But I also want to get access to another application called Aspera. Well, how do we achieve that? Well, you do it by using three types of user models. One I call the trusted user model, where you have a company like Covance that has a relatively mature information security practice, so we felt like they could be a trusted partner in terms of managing data. And so we're going to allow them to federate into this hub using their identities. And then the second type is for where they may be an individual collaborator, or maybe they're part of a company that just has established some of those security practices that makes us comfortable. So I don't want to say they're an untrusted partner, they're just not a trusted partner. So we issue them an ExoStar, what we call a SAM ID. But that still gains them the same level of access to applications that we get. But more importantly, it's portable. So if they're working with Merck, they use it. If they're working with J&J, they use it. It's the same credential. We also accept industry credentials, like from the National Institutes of Health. So this is just kind of a different view of that landscape. It gives you kind of a sense of what some of this looks like. Secure Access Manager, SAM, is at the the middle of that universe, and this just gives you a sense of where some of those user transactions are. But the whole point of this is to create that ecosystem hub so that our users can get access to this in a timely fashion. And that really shifts us to a new perspective. Merck is no longer the center of the universe for our levels of collaboration. We're simply one other user identity in that ecosystem, but it allows our partners and our customers to get access to those in a timely fashion. So now we move into the next stage, and ExoStar was certainly an enabler for us in this, and we move into the finesse stage. This is when you're taking all of those concepts that you learned in online and freestyle and Liberty, and you get back on the horse and you start applying them. Wait a minute, why isn't Lance in that picture? Lance doesn't have a lot of finesse. I'll just state it up front. My horse and I have a lovely relationship, but my wife, who is pictured here, Natalie, has a much higher level, what I would call advanced level of horsemanship, particularly in the saddle. She spends a lot more time in the saddle than I do. And so you see with her steed, Tucker, they're actually performing a dressage test in this picture, and you can see there's at least an elegance to what's going on there, as opposed to me sitting like a lump of coal on my saddle with my horse. But what you begin to do then is, you can consider it in types of a maturity model. You're starting to get that alignment with your horse to where it almost becomes a dance. And that's ultimately what you want to try and achieve with your business, is you're anticipating the directions that they're going because you have those active lines of communication. One of the things that happens with a horse when you stop communicating with them is that's when bad things happen. If you stop communicating with your business, the same can occur. So let's talk through some of the business drivers that took place starting in 2016. First thing was we started to move to Office 365. That was a major disruption in our business. We started to dabble with user and entity behavior analytics. The identity-centric use cases beyond really privileged access abuse is kind of slow to emerge, and I think that's still the case. The IT platform strategy, we started to deliver that, and it really helped us introduce the areas of the business that maybe weren't familiar with identity as another cog in their success strategy. We started focusing on APIs again. Not that we lost focus, but now we're focusing on RESTful services, and including microservices. We're starting to focus on next-gen access management. I will warn you, tread carefully there. We're starting to work on blockchain a little bit, not from an identity context, but the business, saw gold in them thar hills, and we wanted to partner with them to make sure that they understood what the trust and identity implications were for trying to do something using distributed ledger technologies. With customer IAM, for us, it was about gaining alignment with our business. That's still a work in progress because they own a lot of the identity technologies behind that. We don't, but we want to make sure that they do them correctly. Oh yeah, and you can still do everything well and have disaster strike. I'm not going to go into the full detail of this. If you were in the PAM talk yesterday, you heard a little bit more detail. A year ago today, we were struck with what has been called the largest, or at least most costly, cybersecurity attack in history, and I'm sure that's going to get superseded soon. We were hit with NotPetya. We were not the target of the attack. We were caught in the blast radius of it because it was a supply chain attack or a watering hole attack, if you're familiar with that. And so we spent probably a couple of months recovering from that. And so now, in spite of all of our strategic focus, we're now focused on what we call resilience. How do we become more resilient to prevent attacks? Knowing that we're going to get hit again, how do we improve how we respond to those attacks? And so you have to consider defense as, I loved Andrew McAfee's analogy with respect to Go. I think cybersecurity is more of a Go game than a chess game because the moves are infinitely more possible and your attackers are constantly changing their strategy. So very quickly, lessons learned. The business is still the primary driver of our IAM priorities, but you still have to chart your own course at the same time. You still have your agenda, much like my horse still has her agenda. We just have to make sure they're in alignment. Advertise, advertise, advertise your identity services to help drive adoption. It's the soft processes that make you successful. Engage your developers early and often. Make sure from an identity perspective, as you invest in APIs, that you centralize your API documentation. Operationalize your steady state services when possible. Incorporate IAM and security in your SDLC if you haven't already. That's a huge value maker to get your stakeholders involved early instead of waiting until the end of the project and going, oh, we need to do identity. Finally, remember that enrollment doesn't equal security. Partner with your business areas as much as possible to drive standards adoption. And while you're doing that, embrace life and all the challenges that come with it. Thank you very much. I apologize. I'm going to step outside because I know that went exactly as long as I thought it would, and it took all of our time. I'm going to step outside if you do have any questions.
Thank you, Lance. Excellent talk. definitely parallels some of our journey at Johnson & Johnson, and thank you for including us in your journey with ExoStar. As Lance said, he'll see you outside if you have questions. We're going to set up for the next session, which starts in just under 10 minutes. Thank you all for joining us, and hopefully we'll see you back for the next block.